Okay, so in reviewing Gideon's faith, remember he's part of the list in Hebrews 11, you know, talking about his faith. Now, his faith, you're able to compare now that we're developing more names, developing more of a list of names on faith, on those people who had faith. And one of them was Jephthah, which was really weird, right? Because he made a vow,
Yeah.
foolish vow. Whoever comes out of his house is going to be sacrificed as a burnt offering, and it was his daughter.
Oh God.
So we got Jephthah, we got Samson, another one who's miraculous in his birth as well as having miraculous strength. And in his faith, he had wrong desires. He had faith in God, but he surely liked foreign women. He didn't want to be with Jewish women or the Hebrew women. He wanted to be with the Philistine women. He wanted to be with prostitutes. And he's a man of faith. I mean, you can't deny that he's a man of faith. But he was very, narcissistic, you could say. I guess that's the common term these days. He was egotistical. And when he was blinded by the Philistines, he wasn't concerned about killing the Philistines to save his people. He was concerned about killing them because of what they did to his eyes. Let me pay them back for what they did to my eyes and blinding me. That's his faith. That's the kind of, and God helped him because God's goal was to defeat the Philistines, but Samson. So now we're looking at Gideon. And in looking at Gideon's faith, he had a lot of wishy-washy thoughts about being used by God to defeat the enemy, and the enemy at the time in his area were the Midianites. And he wanted to ask God for a sign. Oh God, if you really want to use me to defeat these enemies, because we're in a poor position. We are weak compared to these Midianites. There's no way we can defeat them, basically, is the context, right? We can't defeat these powerful people. They've been ruling over us for seven years, and it didn't even cross their minds to start a revolution against the Midianites, because they know it's a losing battle. And yet God said, I'm going to use you. I'm going to use you to be the leader. And well, if you're going to use me, I need a sign. And so the sign was, to put meat and broth on a rock, and then the angel of the Lord would touch it and fire would consume it. Oh God, I need another sign. I'm cutting to the quick. Can you make it so that this fleece, a wool fleece, the hide of an animal, when I lay it on the floor, on the ground of the wine press, can you make it so that you're going to show me how? It's almost like him saying, you're going to show me how you're over the natural elements. When dew falls on the ground, I want only the hide, the fleece. I only want that to be soaking wet, while everything else would be dry. The dew would only be on that fleece, and the dew would not be on the ground. God did it. The fleece was so wet that he was able to wring it and catch the water and put it in a bowl. And, he filled up a bowl of water while everything else was dry. The ground was dry. And so God gave him another sign. And then he said, oh God, can you please give me another sign if you really want me to go into this battle, if you really want me to defeat the Midianites, can you give me another sign? See, so he was dependent on God. I really need to know. I really need to know. I want to know if this is really what you want me to do and that I can accomplish this. Can you reverse it, basically, and make the dew fall on the ground, but not on the fleece? Make the fleece dry and the ground wet, basically. God does that. So that's Gideon for you. And that's his faith. And so as we continue to learn about God's purpose for Gideon, we're now in chapter 7. Early in the morning, Jerubbaal, that's the new name that Gideon got, okay, because he destroyed the altars of Baal. So Gideon and all his men camped at the spring of Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, you have too many men for me to deliver Midian into their hands. Now, that's natural. If you're going to be going into war, the more the better. Isn't that make sense? I want more soldiers. I'm going to go into battle. I want to outnumber the enemy soldiers. I want more soldiers. But what does God say? You have too many.
Yeah.
You got too many. That's already going against my logic. Right? But remember, the fleece goes against logic. The fleece is wet, the ground is dry. The fleece is dry, the ground is wet. So it goes against logic. And God is going against logic here. Okay? There's still too many. Okay? So what's God's purpose in it? By saying you have too many men for me to deliver Midian into their hands. Well, God's purpose is in order that Israel may not boast against me that her own strength has saved her. Okay? He doesn't want the people to say, it's because there were so many of us, we got the victory. God doesn't want anybody to boast here. So, in order for God to reveal his power and his miracle in this war, he reduced the army so that no one can boast. Does that sound familiar about your salvation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ephesians 2.
There's a verse that says, it is by grace you have been saved.
Ephesians 2, 8 to
Right.
9.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is by faith that you have been saved, not of works,
Not from yourself.
so that no one can boast.
Yep.
So what is God telling us based on this idea of boasting? You cannot show off your righteousness and say, that's why I'm saved. You can't be showing it off and saying, look at me. I've done all these great works for God, and that's why I'm saved. No, God doesn't want us to boast. He wants us to recognize I'm saved because of what Jesus did for me.
That's right. That's right.
I have nothing to boast about.
Mm-hmm.
Then why do you guys do good works? Right? It's because God's purpose is that we do good works, but it's not to get saved. It's to give him the glory as well as we save people, or we reach out to people because we want them to also be saved. But it's not to boast. There's no boasting. Aren't you glad there's no boasting? That's why no matter how sinful you are, I hear of ministers falling all the time because of YouTube. You hear the stories. One famous leader got caught with getting involved with women that are not his wife, that is not his wife, and he's being criticized. He died. All this came out when he died, but he's being criticized because, what a hypocrite. Look at him. He fell. He got involved with women and so forth, and it was like, they take it to the next level and say he's a false teacher. He was never really a man of God, and that he's probably in hell. Well, if you put yourself in his shoes, if he truly was trusting in the Lord, right? Because that was his message, put your faith in the Lord.
Mhm.
Well, if you're really trusting in the Lord, aren't you able to trust in the Lord for the forgiveness of those sins and still be able to make it into heaven and say, I have nothing to boast about, because I really don't deserve to be here, but God saved me. And that applies to all of us. That applies to all of us. So it doesn't matter what anybody says. Hold on a second. I got to take care of this real quick because it's dealing with my friend's, hospice situation.
Princess. Princess?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, never
Okay.
mind.
So thank you for your patience. But, God has this thing about our relationship with him. When you achieve major victories, you better acknowledge it's from him, and you better not think that it's because of me. He doesn't want you to boast. And the context here is, I don't want you to gain the victory over the Midianites and start boasting about it because of all the people, all the soldiers you have. So let's continue. Anybody have any thoughts before I continue? So God is saying, too many. You have too many men for me to deliver Midian into your hands. Their enemies are the Midians, right? In order that Israel may not boast against me, that her own strength has saved her. Announce now to the people, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead. Okay? So he's basically saying, hey, if you're not ready to fight in this war, because you have, you're trembling with fear, you're not confident about going into war, right? Humanly speaking, they say, well, fight anyway. This is a desperate time. You need to fight anyway. No, God says, if you're trembling with fear and you think you're not ready to go into this war, this battle, go home. Don't fight, right? Leave this place. Okay, I'm out of here. I'm not ready to fight, I'm too worried about my family, my wife, my kids, what's going to happen to them if I die. Whatever thoughts are running through your mind. I'm leaving. I'm not ready to fight. And God gave me permission to do that. He's not forcing me to fight. So I have the freedom in this scenario to leave, and I'm leaving. Okay? Who's going to join me? I'm
Excuse
leaving.
me.
And then somebody says, I'm not ready to fight either. Oh, neither am I. Neither am I. So how many
Pastor.
how many of them left? 22,000. Yeah, Susie, what was your thought?
Okay, thank you, Princess. Thank you, Sister Princess.
Yeah.
Sister Princess answered it.
Yeah, so
Judges
we're
chapter
in book
7.
of Judges chapter 7 now. And I was just
Okay,
reading verse 3,
thank you.
that God told them, if you're afraid, if you're trembling with fear about going into war, he's saying, don't fight, leave. And it's not in a disrespectful way. It was like, basically, you can leave, you can turn back and leave,
Go home.
go home, you don't need to fight in this battle if you're not ready. 22,000 left.
Wow.
Okay, so they had a big army start off with, right?
That's a lot.
Yeah. 22,000. They all said, yeah, we're not ready. And God gave them permission. There's no condemnation if you're not ready to fight. Okay, so it was a reasonable, scenario. Okay. But the Lord said to now in verse 4, but the Lord said to Gideon, there are still too many. 22,000 left. We don't know how many they started off with, but there's still too many.
You've got to do a recount.
You
They
know?
start at 32,000
Oh, is that what you got?
because it says 22,000 left and then 10,000 remain.
Okay, let's do the math, right? Okay. Verse 4 says, take them down to the water, and I will sift them for you there. God is going to sift the soldiers of Gideon, the troops, the troops of Gideon. Okay.
Do groups.
If I say this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So either not go or go. Okay, those are the two groups. So Gideon took the men down to the water. There the Lord told him, separate those who lap the water with their tongues like a dog from those who kneel down to drink. Okay, so who lap the water with a dog, and then those who kneel. This is God's way of sifting people. Isn't it weird that God could have just said, those to the left, they go, those to the right, they don't go. He wanted to go through the process of seeing who's really ready to go to war and who's not. Isn't that an interesting thing about war, by the way? Israel is in war, man. This is serious, and it could result in major wars. But they've been in war since October 7th, right? When they first got hit. But I think confidently, knowing what they know about the Bible, and they followed the scriptures, they know this story, and they probably have it as part of their protocol that if you're not ready to fight, we don't want you to fight. You've got to want to fight, okay, in this war. Does that make any sense? That Israel most likely took that approach in this October 7th war. If you are not ready, we don't want you to fight. But if you are, then we want you to engage in this war. I think that's because of the teaching here. When I was in Israel, we did go, part of our tour was to go to Golan Heights. Deborah, you remember that, right? And when we were in Golan Heights, we actually took pictures with the soldiers.
That was cool.
Yeah, the soldiers were kids, okay? I call them kids because they look like they're, 17, 18 years old. They even look like they were 16. I don't know what their minimum age is to join
18.
the military, 18.
Yeah,
So
right after
they're
high
all 18-year-olds. They're all in military uniform, informal military, not formal because they were, out there in the field. But they were so gracious, wanted to take pictures with us. They were just so excited meeting foreigners like us in Israel, and they knew we were on their side because we're touring Israel.
Yeah.
They're probably at war. They're probably in this war. Okay, that's how serious it is when you look at it. But again, there is the sifting process. If you don't want to fight, then we don't want you to fight. But if you want to fight, then you're ready to go. Let's go. And they're dealing with it right now, battling with Hamas in Gaza, and then battling with Hezbollah in the north. That's near Golden Heights area.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so put some reality into the story with Gideon and the Midianites. Serious war here, and if you're not ready, go home. But God, in this war, he says, there's still too many. And so let's see how to determine, how to sort these soldiers, whether they're ready or not. Between how they drink water. Isn't that interesting? How you drink water. Okay. So the Lord said to Gideon, I'm in verse 7 now. The Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midian. Okay. So the 300 that lapped, that's what he's going to use to defeat the Midianites. Okay. So let the other men go, each to his own place. So those who didn't drink water, lapping it, they go home because they're not ready. And all God wanted was 300 men. That's all he wanted. Outnumbered. We're outnumbered, God. You just sent home 22,000 and more. And now there's only 300 left. And now you want us to fight? Remember, this is life or death.
Oh, yeah.
And you want us to fight with only 300 soldiers?
Yeah.
And God is saying, yeah, I like that. It's like the odds of winning is really low, right? That's a low percentage.
Outnumbered.
We're totally outnumbered. Okay, let's continue. Let the others go home. Let the others go, each to his own place. So Gideon sent the rest of the Israelites to their tents, but kept the 300 who took over the provisions and trumpets of the others. Okay, so they took the provisions and trumpets. That's their weapons, trumpets and other things. Let's see what it says. Now the camp of Midian, the camp of Midian lay below him in the valley. During that night, the Lord said to Gideon, get up, go down against the camp, because I am going to give it into your hands. Okay, how did you get your math, Princess? Because I thought we will find it, but it looks like
No,
I
I
don't-
just
I don't see the math.
from the verses, 22,000 left, and then the remained 10,000. So I just added.
Where is that?
Yeah.
On the
I missed
first,
it.
I only see 300.
yeah, it's on the verse 3. Now announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead. So 22,000 men left while 10,000 remained.
There's your math right there. 10,000 remain.
Yeah.
32 left, 32 total.
32,000.
And then God said that was too many. So then how many left based from the 10,000?
300.
300.
300.
Huh? No, how many
300.
left? Not how
Oh,
many? How many?
2,700.
9,700 left.
9,700.
9,700.
They left, they went home while the 300 remained.
Yes.
That's it. Which
Wow.
tells you 9,700, they knelt on the ground to drink water. You know, I see the one next to me, he's kneeling on the ground to drink water. I'll do the same. I'll drink like him,
Beep. Wrong.
So
right?
you will go home.
I'll do what he's doing. He's doing it, I'll do it too. Go home, go home, go home, go home. 9,700, okay?
Wow.
And there's only 300 that drank it the other way, which is lapping. Okay, there's your math, okay? See, when you study those scriptures, you also got to learn math. You learn about military strategy, you're learning about math, okay?
Stop barking.
That's how it goes. You keep learning all these different areas of, you know, of life. Now, the camp of Midian, it says, lay below him. I'm in verse 8. Now, the camp of Midian lay below him in the valley. During that night, the Lord said to Gideon, get up, go down against the camp, because I am going to give it into your hands. Now, you know, you notice God repeats the victory. I'm going to give them into your hands. You know,
Mhm.
and when God gives them into your hands, you have control and power over them. I'm going to give that to you. All right. If you are afraid to attack, see, God is accommodating the fact that, hey, if you're afraid, well, it's like God saying, I'll help you through this. You know, if you're afraid, let's see what it says. Verse 10, if you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah and listen to what they are saying. Okay, so sneak down, right? Like spy on what they are saying. Spy on these enemies of yours. Sneak down there. Go down. Okay, this is war. So, yeah, don't get caught. But afterward, you will be encouraged to attack the camp. This is God giving him another sign. Would you agree? I'm going to tell you, you know, you're going to see this. It's like an encouraging sign to keep you on track to go against your enemy. Okay? I only have 300 men. I'm already discouraged. How are we gonna beat these, you know, soldiers? How are we gonna beat these fighting men? Listen to what they are gonna be saying. Afterward, you will be encouraged. So,
Oh, wow.
do you know when you're going into something that might be like intimidating? It's like, I don't know if I can do this, God. I don't know if I can. Be mindful of the fact God can give you encouraging signs. You know, in fact, one pastor says, you know, pray for an encouraging sign. You know, sometimes, you know, your energy is, you know, sapped, and or sometimes, you know, there's some fear there, discouragement, and sometimes you just need God to encourage you. Okay, so feel free to ask God for encouragement. Okay, and then be mindful of the fact that He could encourage you in this, you know, persevering journey. You need sometimes you just need encouragement. So be mindful of that. And God says, I will encourage you to attack the camp. So he, that's Gideon, and Purah, his servant, went down to the outposts of the camp. Okay, the Midianites and the Amalekites. Okay, and all the other eastern peoples. How many? They're outnumbered even by nations. It's
That's what I
only
said.
Israel.
More than 300.
No, it's only Israel, and they're outnumbered by different nations, not just one nation.
Yeah.
It says the Midianites, the Amalekites, and all other eastern peoples. Right
Oh.
now, Israel is outnumbered. Do you realize in their current war, they're outnumbered by the fact that who's going against them? Somebody from the north, which is Hezbollah, Lebanon area,
Mhm.
they're going against Israel. And then somebody from the south, Hamas, they're going against Israel. So in a sense, it's 2-1. And then we also are aware of the fact Iran, right,
Yeah.
has been very instrumental or very much involved in these things. They're like backing the war of fighting against Israel. And you got Iran there. They're on the east.
Yeah. Sending ammunition.
Yeah. So
That's
now it's
right.
like three nations against one nation. And
That's why
Israel
we
is
pray for
having,
Israel.
and remember, Israel did not start this war. October 7th, we saw all the
How you doing, Bob?
enemies, by ship, by sea, by air, by land. They attacked these innocent Israelis in their celebration of their feast.
Yeah. The kids.
So it's like, what are you going to do? It's complicated, but they're going to war because of all these things, right? They started it. Now, so I'm trying to kind of put some flesh and blood to these storylines, right? So the Midianites, the Amalekites, and all the other eastern peoples had settled in the valley. It says thick as locusts. If you've ever seen a plague or a swarm of locusts,
Yeah. It's a lot.
yeah, there's a lot. There's too many to count. Their camels could be, excuse me, their camels could no more be counted than the sand on the seashore. I mean, the soldiers are like a locust. The camels, there's so many of them, you can't even count the camels that are going to be used for war, right?
Yeah.
Can't even count them. They're more than the sand on the seashore, is figuratively speaking, right? I mean, like a bunch of sand that you try to count. You can't count all the sand on the seashore. Okay? So that's what's going on in the background as they're dealing with the Midianites. Gideon arrived just as a man was telling a friend his dream. So they must have snuck in, and then they're hearing this. Maybe they're standing on the other side of the tent or something, and while they're there, they're hearing what they're saying, right? So it says, I had a dream, he was saying. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. His friend responded, this can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash. So at this point, Gideon was already known and had a reputation. Okay, from the things we've read so far, he hasn't really established his reputation except for what he did to the altars of Baal and the Asherah poles. He destroyed his father's altars, and no one could take revenge on Gideon for doing that. So maybe that's where, there's a troublemaker within the Israelite, people. So this Gideon, he must have been the one. He must be the one to do that, in this dream. He's that barley loaf who, overturned, struck it with such force that the tent of the Midian camp overturned and collapsed. This is all a dream, and they're tying it in with Gideon. So Gideon's hearing all this, right?
How you doing, Bobby?
The Israelite God has given the Midianites. Let me read it one more time. Verse 14. Hold on, let me fix the background,
Oh, okay.
guys. Let me fix the background. Okay, so where are we? So his friend responded, he's listening to this dream. This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands. Wow, this guy is accurately interpreting this dream. When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he worshiped God. That is like, oh, wow, that is an encouraging sign. They even had a dream about what's going to happen. The enemies had a dream about what's going to happen. So that encouraged Gideon. He returned to the camp of Israel and called out. Okay, this is like, okay, now we're going to do this. Get up. The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands, dividing the 300. Okay, so he says, okay, we're gonna get this victory. They're gonna be in our hands, dividing the 300 men into 3 companies. Okay, so now you have 3 companies. He placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them with torches inside. So all of them has number 1, trumpets. Number 2, empty jars. And number 3, torches inside the jars. That sounds weird to you and I, right? But I came across some historical perspective. And the historical perspective I got was that when you have military organized, there is one torch bearer, right? And for every one torch bearer, they lead between 200 to 500 people per torch bearer. So if I was a torch bearer, right, there would be 200 to 500 soldiers who would follow me. Are you guys getting this? So if you're talking about 300, then what does that look like? 300 times 500? What's that? About 15,000? Is my math right? I'm using my calculator just to make sure.
500 times 300, Pastor.
Oh, it's 150,000.
Yeah.
150,000. So they're estimating either 150,000 to what is it? 60,000. That's the normal thinking of when I go into war and I have all these men, I want to assign between 200 to 500 men for each torch bearer. Okay? And there's 300 torch bearers here. So do you see, part of war is the art of deception. Okay? That's just something to keep in mind. Part of, going into war, it's the art of deception. You're making the enemy think that there's 60,000 to 150,000 soldiers. Now that's pretty cool, I think, having that perspective. Okay, so they got their torches, they got their trumpets, They got their empty jars. Okay. Watch me. I'm in verse 17 now. Watch me, he told them. Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp, blow yours and shout for the Lord and for Gideon. Now that's interesting, isn't it? They're going to be shouting, just like what happened in Jericho,
Jericho.
right? But their shout is specific for the Lord and for Gideon. Who's giving these instructions?
The Lord.
Well, I mean,
Maybe
on a
to
human
Gideon.
level, who's giving these instructions?
Gideon.
Gideon is giving these instructions to these men.
Yeah. Gideon.
Doesn't it look kind of egotistical? Do it for my name and for the Lord, but do it for my name too. That's pretty interesting take, that he wants them to shout for the Lord and for Gideon. Maybe because Gideon already has that reputation, and that's going to create in them more fear to the enemy. Again, the art of deception is to make them fear, because when you're fighting in fear, you don't know what you're doing. You can lose the war because you're not thinking clearly. Okay. Gideon and the 300 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch. So middle watch, most likely, probably in the middle of the night. Just after they had changed the guard, they blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. The three companies, maybe it's 100, 100, 100, three companies, right? You're dealing with 300. The three companies blew the trumpets and smashed the jars, grasping the torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets they were to blow. What in the world is going on? They're not carrying any swords.
Confusion.
There's no weapons, just torches and trumpets. This is the kind of battle that 300 will use against, all these enemies, right? When the 300 trumpets sounded, wow, imagine 300 trumpets sounding. That must be a scary sound. And, the other day, you guys got to hear the sound of the shofar, right? A goat's horn. The Lord caused the men throughout the camp, okay, with all this, chaos,
Yeah.
right? There's chaos now. So with all this chaos in their camp, the Midian camp, that's what the Israelites did. They're creating chaos for the enemy, and they're the ones who are in full control about what's going on and how they're going to defeat them. They had a clear plan using trumpets and empty jars, right? Torches. Yeah, the torches. When the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their swords. Okay. Do you know that's what God is able to do for you when you are dealing with people who are so totally against you because you're a Christian, right? And they hate you and they want to do anything they can to harm you or hurt you, whether it's at work, at school, whether it's in the neighborhood. You got these enemies who just hate your guts because you're a Christian, and they hate you for being a Christian and so forth. And then it's not just one person against you. There's people, who are ganging up on you because you're a Christian. Here is some insight that God can cause them such confusion that they'll turn on each other. They end up hurting each other, and out of their hatred for you, they're now turning on each other because of their confusion. And you don't have to do anything. You just let God do all the work. Isn't that interesting?
Very.
In Psalm 37, it says, the wicked bend the bow to bring down the poor and needy, but their swords will pierce their own hearts and their bows will be broken. Do you guys need that verse in Psalm 37?
Yes,
it's like,
please.
I got a bow, I got a sword, and I'm going against you, Norma, Deborah. I'm going against you with my sword and my bow, and we're going against you. And what does God do? I end up stabbing my own friend. I end up using my sophisticated bow and aiming it at you, and it breaks and it explodes on my face. God can do that. See, that's what God reveals. He wants to show us, as if to say, don't you realize I can do this? Don't you realize this is how I do things? Right? So do you need that verse in Psalm 37?
Yes, please.
Okay, since you said please, baby Catherine. Everybody turns to Psalm 37. Where is it?
Before 38 and after 36.
37.
Okay, Matt.
Verse 21. Go ahead and read it for us, baby Catherine, to confirm that it's verse 21.
Okay. The wicked borrow and do not repay, but the righteous give generously. Is it that, Pastor?
No. See? I was testing you.
Yeah, I am. I know. The turntable.
It is actually verse 14 and 15. Try that.
Okay. The wicked draw the sword and bend the bow to bring down the poor and needy, to slay those whose ways are upright. But their swords will pierce their own hearts, and their bows will be broken.
No, that's
There
it.
you go. That's the one.
14, 15.
Yeah. See. So you see how God is described as being able to do this, and it's written in Psalm 37 that God is able to do this. In Judges, here's a record of God doing this to your enemies, Israel. He'll create confusion so that they'll pierce, it's called friendly fire in military terms. I ended up shooting my own friend, when we were at battle, because we thought we were surrounding the enemy and the enemy ducked, and I ended up shooting my friend instead. And then he shot me back, and we're both injured or killed, Friendly fire. It happens in war. It's happening here. Okay? The Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their swords. What's Gideon and all of them are doing? All they have is the torch and the trumpet. No swords. Imagine going to war where they're trying to kill you with their swords, spears. I just have a trumpet. I just have a torch. Okay. The army fled to Beth Shittah towards Zerah, as far as the border of Abel Meholah near Tabith. Okay. So what did they end up doing? They were so confused and afraid of what was going on that they ran. They fled, which God says, that's what I'll do for you. You know? So
It causes confusion.
it creates confusion to your enemies.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what it sounds like
Israelites,
at the beginning.
okay, Asher and all the Nasa were called out, and they pursued the Midianites. So now the Midianites are running, right? Gideon sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim saying, come down against the Midianites and seize the waters of the Jordan ahead of them as far as Beth Bara. So now all the other tribes are starting to join in. But remember, they started with only 300. So now, with all this mass confusion going on, they actually have help. Come down against the Midianites and seize the waters of the Jordan ahead of them. So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they took the waters of the Jordan as far as Beth Bara. They also captured 2 of the Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeeb. They killed Oreb on the rock at the rock of Oreb, and Zeeb at the winepress of Zeeb. What did they do? They killed them in their own home, in their own territory. Okay. And they pursued the Midianites and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeeb to Gideon, who was by the Jordan. Look at that. They took their heads. Back then, that was part of war. You would cut their heads off.
Beheaded.
Yeah. I'm sorry to share something sick to you, but I actually saw a beheading on video.
Ew.
I know. But it was during the time when it was near after 9/11, and then there were all these terrorists that were rising up.
Oh yeah.
They captured, I guess, an American. And when they captured him, they shot it on video and they posted it. And when I saw them behead a human being, it was the most shocking thing. Israel is doing it right here. Okay? Not ISIS, Israel. Why? Because that's the way they fought wars back then. In order to kill somebody, to make sure they're dead, right? Because you know how it is in war. Sometimes they fake like they're dead or they're only injured. Here, they wanted to make 100% sure that this leader, Zeeb and Oreb, would be confirmed dead by having their head cut off from their body. It's a common thing during this time, but for us, it's shocking. So that's as far as we go in this story. How Gideon defeated the Midianites with only 300 soldiers. No weapons were used, just a torch and trumpet.
And a jar.
Yeah, the jar was probably filled with a lot of oil, and that's probably how they soaked up, their torches with oil. But they used the jar too, to make that noise. And so we're looking at the faith, not necessarily the battle, but the faith of Gideon is commended, even though he had this, God, give me another sign, give me another sign. Hey, if that's what it takes for you to serve God and do what he wants, it looks like God is willing to accommodate if you're asking for a sign of encouragement, something to say, okay, I need you to, build my faith or build my encouragement, so I'll go forward with this, because this is life or death. And on that note, we're done with this story.
Pastor, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking about the torch and the trumpet. It's like back then, when you have one torch, it signifies that there's a large group of men. So can you imagine 300 torch there? So it's more than 300 times 10,000 or whatever. And plus the trumpet, it means that there's one group of large men also represents one trumpet. So they were really scared, feared, confused, shocked.
Yeah. And that's the kind of warfare that God creates
Yes.
when he is fighting your battle. And it's specifically for this scenario, right? But yeah, that's how God did it. This is, show me your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. This is our way, or this is how we learn God's ways. This is God's way. Our way is, no, don't let 22,000 people leave. Our way is, we need them all to stay for this war. But God's way is different. By 300, I'll save you. And it's like, what are you going to do about that? Okay, Lord, I surrender. I submit. Do it your way, God. Doesn't make sense to me. I want 32,000 soldiers to fight these Midianites and other nations. I don't want any of them to leave. That's my logic. God's way is, I want them all to get out of here. I just want 300. What are you going to do? You're going to have to submit, right? Okay, God, that you said it. Okay, let's do it your way. That kind of thing, right? Any other thoughts? Okay, so now you got a idea of Gideon, and the next one is Barak.
Barak.
The story of Barak. And you can't study Barak without studying Deborah, because they're connected.